Today we're working on this International. It's a mid 80s. It's got a 6V92 two-stroke Detroit in it. We're going to be doing some work to the motor. We're going to be doing some work to the front end. Front end, maybe you'll see here, it's scrubbing the tires off. You see how you have more tread here, less tread here, and they're kind of feathered, right? Each one of them is kind of the same way. It comes up this way and then up. And I expect the kingpins are out of it. And we got a bunch of lights that don't work. This tire's doing the same thing. Doesn't show up nearly as easy on camera, but same thing there. And we got to fix the fuel tank. The sending unit is bad. I just looked at that yesterday. So we got to get a sending unit for it. We got to turn the tank like it's supposed to be so you can actually fill it easy without smacking the bottom of the cab. We got to do something about a step here if we can. We're putting 8 tires on it. This one's flat off the bead. They've all got scrub issues. You can see here, see how it's wearing. I believe the axle's out of alignment, which is outside of my abilities. It'll have to go somewhere, get the rear axle aligned. And we're going to be pulling the brakes. You see this tire here is just horrible. These two, he was replacing these 2 at a time, and if you pay attention to how these are scrubbed, it looks like the axles are shifted and kind of dragging that way is what it looks like. Looks like they're scrubbing because they're out of alignment. So first we're going to start with the kingpin. So I got a bottle jack under it and some cribbing and a bar under the bottom of the tire. What we're going to look at is how much play is in between here and then up in the top, which will be very tough to get with the camera. So the kingpins are worn. When I'm doing the pry bar, it seems there's a lot more play, but my assistant isn't quite as forceful as I am. There you go. So we're going to go ahead and pull the front wheels. You can quit. Okay. We're going to pull the front wheels, look at the brakes, inspect the bearings, all that kind of stuff. We're going to give it a once over. It's got some oil leaks, so let's get this apart. We're gonna check this. We're gonna check everything I can think of. I'm gonna go put the socket on that and look. It's not even tight.
Wow.
Watch how these come off. Like hardly any effort at all. These were never tightened. I don't know who put these wheels on last. That's unacceptable. I mean, none of them were tight. Alright, I got that drum off. It's got a bunch of cracking in it. The shoes themselves don't look bad, like maybe somebody replaced the shoes but didn't replace the drum. They've either over greased it or the S-cam seals are in backwards, one or the other. We'll have to get the bearings part on this and get a look at them. See, the thing is, if you get grease on there and then it gets on your brake linings and they're contaminated, they don't break as well. Plus, you get enough stuff on there they can catch fire. We don't want that. See what they are. This side was losing oil in the hub, and you can see the seal's wet. And here's the best part about it. Got water in there, so a good possibility that them bearings aren't any good in there. They don't feel loose up and down or in and out, but whatever. Yummy. The bearings all looked really good. I really have no reason to replace the bearings at all, and they're Timken bearings. The races look okay. Nothing significant. I mean, nothing that warrants need to replace. So we're good on that. We're gonna have to have brake drums for both sides because they're cracked pretty good, but not bad. We need kingpins, so all this is gonna have to come apart to get to the kingpins. 2 bars. There's one snug. Hey, look, one was tight. Shoot, 1 out of 10. What do you need?
Well, that's good, I guess. At least one was.
It's better than nothing. I'll get my pry bar and get them off there. Alright, we got all the wheels off and all the tires are dismounted, and there was a problem with every single tire that was on this truck. Every single one had something wrong with it. And now we're down to, we're gonna back the brakes off, get the drums off, and see what we got back here. Alright, so this brake shoe, it's not sitting where it needs to be, and it's rubbing on the drum. See it right in here where it's rubbing, and you got some heat check cracks in the drum itself. Look at that. It's not even breaking out here. You see how it's not making contact. These are only a year old, these brake drums. There's already a pretty good lip right there. Hard to see in the camera, but there are all kinds of heat checks in them. This side wasn't horrible, but we got dampness here. Bad wheel seal there. This one's wet. The seal's leaking on it, and this is the worst. It's caked. So those brake shoes are no good. Those ones aren't contaminated yet. So we'll be alright with that. So these brake drums are the same. Heat checked pretty good. That's unfortunate. I'm taking all of them apart. We're putting all 4 new wheel seals in, checking the bearings and all that stuff. The importance of a stud in there. The stud goes in and you tighten it up, and then you run your fine thread nut on this side so you're not pulling the threads out of here when you're torquing. So a lot of times these will have Loctite on them, on the studs, so that they don't look like they're pulling aluminum material out with them. You can see the chunks here. I don't know if that's aluminum or if it's never sees.
Oh, that was pretty easy.
It's because it doesn't have little wedges in there. Well, apparently this one's got water in it. It just goes from bad to worse, don't it? Oh man, that's pretty gross. Great. Fantastic.
Well, we got this side all apart and it's draining, so we're moving on to the other side.
I need to clarify something I didn't do in the beginning of the video. This truck does not belong to me. This belongs to a friend of mine. He bought it 2 years ago, and when he did, he took it to his mechanic. And he had him do some repairs. He had him put all new brake shoes on the rear, all new brake chambers on the rear, new wheel seals and new bearings on one axle, but all new wheel seals on the rear. They put a transmission in it, and they put an air dryer on it, and that was his $10,000 bill, which, if you guys have ever messed with these trucks, you understand $10,000 doesn't go very far in maintenance. It's like this type of repairs. It doesn't go far at all. They did replace the brake drums at the same time as the shoes. Not a fan of these brake drums. This is pressed steel welded to cast. Is what it is. So he had him do all this work, and I met the man. And, well, let's just put it this way. We're going to be taking apart everything he's done and inspecting it. We'll just leave it at that. What I need to talk about next is what is causing these tires to move. If you notice this thing, I'll try and explain this well. The leaf springs mount to the axle like every other truck. Well, up in the front, they don't actually mount. They just kind of slide in that equalizer up there. And the same thing back here. And then there's kind of a hump in the spring hangers, in the hanger and the equalizer, where as this comes up it pushes. So this particular suspension, when that axle pushes up, it pushes down on this one. So, and vice versa. So it's supposed to equalize the load. They do fine on road, not so good off road. You know, you end up one wheel up in the air spinning, and yeah, it's not exactly ideal. So after he had all that work done by the mechanic, he took it to had this set of leaf springs replaced at a spring shop, and you can see they have a decent arch to them. They're okay. And this set right here, try and stay out of the light, they got a little bit of a flat spot. You can see how it flattens and out to here and then arches up on either side. So they're a little worn. The other side is similar to that. So we have one really good set that's been replaced. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go through and try and find out, why is this axle moving? It is centered on the leaf spring, but the leaf spring doesn't really do anything to keep the axle centered. Okay, so it uses what's called a torque arm. This arm right here goes forward to back, and that is what keeps the axle from moving forward and back. So as you can see here, the rubber bushing is just about completely gone out of that arm. This is the worst one. They're all deteriorated. Some are worse than others. I expected to see worse, really. But regardless, they may not look horrible, but you can see gaps in several places around, and it may not look like it's got a lot of play in it now, but imagine, you know, going to make a turn, and this truck's GVW is 52,000 pounds. So when you go to make a turn, this axle's rated for 20. So you can have 20,000 pounds of weight on it, plus the actual force acting on that rubber. So the other side isn't as bad as this side. I mean, they pretty much look like that one. So we're just going to replace all of those, and then we're going to go ahead and replace these little cotter pins they put in here, split pins, whatever you call them, put in the correct size. These are just far too small, and this one over here is on the back side. We'll change that out too. I put them in the other way, so that's not ever rubbing against the tire or coming, you know, that kind of stuff. So we have to do that. Now I'm looking the thing over, and you know, just like I would any other truck, and I see that, you know, that axle seal must have been leaking since the day he put it in. You can see the bushing there. So I'm checking U-bolts. I want to make sure there's no goofy anything going on. And this side, actually, I think he told me that stack was replaced at the spring shop too. These two, just the rear axle. Now you can see here, there's a rust stain here, and that's a very good indication that those U-bolts are loose. So you can almost see a little gap in there. You can see a little bit of movement here. Now that may have been when they put it back together, they put it ended up in a different place, or it could have been this moved. So like I said, he replaced the brake chambers, and that's not going to work. That jam nut is never tightened, so I'll have to run it down here, tighten it up, and I will have to check all the others to make sure they're tight. We'll check the slack adjusters, make sure they operate correctly. We got a pinion seal leaking here on the back of the front drive. At least the pinion's tight. The rear drive shaft slip yoke's good. The rear U-joints feel good. The rear pinion feels good, no leaks really. I mean, it's damp. We'll put that on the watch list. And this, we have to flush this this differential. This is the one that's got the water in it. So we'll put this on the list. Now look, that's nice. Look at that. A nut for the cross member. The bolt doesn't come through. When a bolt comes through, I like to see at least 3 threads come through a bolt, whether it's a chassis bolt, steering, suspension, a lug nut, whatever. I like to see 3 threads. Which brings me to the next thing. You see this, these threads don't even make it through. They don't even crest the nut. So we'll have to replace them. We'll have to get some U-bolts for that. This side is okay. If you guys notice, you're not seeing any jack stands. They're in the back. I have them, this whole truck's supported, plus I have the cradle underneath it as well, so we don't want it to tip over. Okay, so now we're going to move forward and look at that drive shaft. Alright, I want to check all the U-joints in this drive shaft, so I started back here. If you look, this drive shaft, the U-joint has play. I'm going to push a little harder. The yoke itself is loose. It's probably worn in the splines, and this will probably have to be replaced. The U-joint has some play. Okay, so this is actually loose. Can you see it? See it moving right there? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's bad. We'll move up the line. Okay, up here to the slip yoke. And the slip yoke just has a real nominal amount of play in it. It's not...
Oh, sorry, I was pointing the wrong thing.
It's not horrible. Like, you can hold this one and move this one just slightly. You see that washer's on there. It's probably been balanced recently. Well, I guess at some point. I'm missing a bolt here, and then look at that. That U-joint is loose in the yoke. So that yoke is probably no good. The U-joint itself is no good. It's got play. And then this carrier bearing, see if you can look right. Actually, go right here. See if you can look right there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then I just keep going forward. To this U-joint. That cross is okay, but it's kind of deceiving because when you go to this one has play in it. And the worst part is, I just had this transmission put in. You can almost hear that. It's not horrible, but if I got to pull the drive shaft out anyways, we're just going to do them all. Alright, we're at the air dryer here, and I've noticed an oil leak in here on this tank, and you can see it on the bottom of here. Oh look, that line's just about kinked. Nice. As you can see, that's a new air dryer he had put on, and yeah, it's leaking oil. So the compressor The air compressor is probably leaking oil. See that fitting right there, that 90 that goes into the tank? Just because your hardware store has brass fittings doesn't mean they're DOT fittings. Alright, so up here on the compressor, on the back side, right here, where the compressor meets the back of the engine, we got oil leak here. And that's a separate oil leak from what's getting in the dryer. So we'll drain the air tanks, and we'll take this line loose. This is a supply line that comes from the compressor to the air dryer, and we'll see if there's oil inside there, which I'm sure there is. We'll check that out, and this needs fixed. We're gonna have to get this into loom. You can't just let wire rub like this. This is just a electrical short waiting to happen. Bunch of hangers loose all over. You know, something that just takes a few minutes can save so much time. Yeah, look, you like this. This belt, extremely loose. This belt, not as loose. This belt, about the same as the second, but that one's out. That's way too much play for them belts for my liking, so we'll be adjusting those. It isn't a big deal, it's pretty simple. He just pressure washed this engine so it'd be easier to work on. Oh yeah, there's another problem. We'll probably have to take the oil cooler off. He's getting oil in his antifreeze. So we're gonna have to take the oil cooler off and take it out of there and see what we can do. See if we can replace it, see if that's a culprit. Yeah, I mean, it's an old 6V92 two-stroke Detroit, and she's got some age on her. Just put it that way. She's got some age. We're gonna go ahead and change the fuel filters as well, and we'll change oil at the same time. He's been flushing the coolant, trying to get the oil out, and so far so good. Probably have to do it another time or two, but that's all right. The shock bushing's gone too, so I'll have to replace that. Anyway, so that's where we're at. We also have some oil leakage at the turbo, which I don't know how easy that's going to be to show, but we're going to take the downpipe off the turbo, and we're going to check the shaft and see what we got going on, and we're going to lift the turbo off and look down on the blower and see if we have oil on the top of the blower. Yeah, he's having an issue blowing some oil around, that's for sure. So, what am I going to do next? What was I saying? Oh yeah, air compressor. Let's work with the air compressor. So I'm looking around, and the front leaf springs look okay. I don't see anything broken or cracked or weak, or no pins working their way out or anything like that. I am noticing all over this truck there's like hangers that, you know, are supposed to hold this hose assembly, you know, from rubbing on the bottom of the shock, you know, and rubbing elsewhere. And I don't understand why people don't put this stuff back. I mean, here's another one. Look at this. It's gonna just grind into that heater hose right there if it isn't already. You know, I just don't understand it. I'm gonna have to fix this. This is the wiring for the tail lights, and you can see how hot that is. That's been very hot, and it's just on the lower side from what I could see. It's not the top, and there's some conductor exposed right there, so I wonder if that was shorting out when the hood's closed, if there's something on the hood that was touching or forcing it to go somewhere. Butt connector outside, great. Okay, all right, well, we're just gonna keep on looking. You know, if it's not right, we're just gonna have to fix it. That's just what it is. All right, let's get this part. Somebody loves butt connectors, don't they? Grief. That's just a turn signal. That's not even a marker light. That means there's no marker light on the front of that at all. Well, that'll have to be changed. That's supposed to be a marker. Same thing there. Well, shoot, that can't even work. This is probably the turn signal, and this is the marker. Guess we'll have to fix this too. Had a blowout. Destroyed the headlight bucket and the bumper. We're gonna have to get a bumper, fabricate a bumper or something. This is unacceptable. That's the inlet to the turbo. I don't know why anybody would ever drill a hole in the top of that. I mean, I know they probably were trying to put starting fluid in there, but why in the world would you put that on the top? There's one there too. It just means water can go down in there and get into your turbo and then shove it into the motor. And the worst part is, like, if water can get in here, like snow laying on it, and it finds a way in, trickles in, this thing could sit and the snow could all melt and just, you know, fill the turbo full and then just go from the turbo, you know, right into your intake. This thing doesn't have an intercooler, so it just goes right from the air intake right to the turbo and down into the blower. That'd be bad. That'd be real bad. I'll have to do something about that. Alright, so the air compressor on these trucks will take clean air, usually from the intake, you know, from the air cleaner assembly after it's been filtered, and it'll suck air into it, and then it compresses. It's working and making air pressure as the engine turns. This is gear driven, so it's turning that compressor. The compressor is gonna take air in, compress it through the 2 cylinders, and then take pressurized air, send it down this steel braided line to the air dryer. It's gonna try and separate as much of the moisture out of the air as it can. That sucks. That needs to be tightened up. Good Lord, everywhere I look, there's more to do. So it tries to separate. That doesn't mean you don't have to drain your air tanks. It just means that it gets a lot of it out. It doesn't get it all out. It never will. It's impossible. You have a steel tank also. Difference in temperature, humidity. I mean, just depends on what's being pumped into it and how long it sits, and the temperature changes. This air compressor uses engine coolant as well as oil. Okay, the engine coolant's going to come in and it's going to cool the unit, the head part. It'll cool the head, so as it runs, it's not overheating. It also uses engine oil. The engine oil lubricates a little crankshaft. This is basically a small engine. It has an intake valve, has an exhaust valve, it has pistons, it has rings, it has a crankshaft. It is a small engine, so it needs that engine oil to lubricate that crankshaft, the bearings, and so on and so forth. So what we're thinking may be happening is it's pushing the oil that it's using to lubricate the bottom end is getting into the top end, and via the rings are bad, or maybe one of the pistons is bad. You don't know. Alright, I got the air compressor out, and now we need to pull the fittings out because this has a cord charge on it. So we got to take all these fittings out before we take it in and get a new one. And now I'm working on the turbo. And the turbo, get this. You see it's leaking oil on this side and pushing it in the intake. The intake's soaked. I got a protective cap in here so nothing gets in there, but I just wiped it down, but it's soaked in oil. I do that because I don't want a nut or bolt or anything to fall down in here, because the blower is right underneath this, and the blower of a 2-stroke is just like these 2 twisted rods that have to form together perfectly. So you get one little thing in there and that'd be the end of it. It would grenade in a hurry. I can only assume that's for the backup lights. Somebody was messing around, being as though we're missing a wire there, and this looks like it belongs back there. Let's look into that. Alright, so I got the oil cooler out. The oil cooler was putting engine oil into the cooling system, and I have this flange here. It's an aluminum flange with steel studs right here, and there's a bunch of corrosion in there, so I'm letting it soak. This is one of those O-ring flanges where you tighten the O-ring, tighten the flange, and it squeezes the O-ring around the housing. So we got that. I got the oil filter housing off. We're getting all that cleaned up, and I still have to do the front seal of the engine leaks, so we're gonna have to pull all the pulleys off and the belts, and pull the damper, or pull the crank pulley off, I guess, and do that seal. Hopefully it's not a big deal. We might have to put a repair sleeve. I don't know. We'll see. I got the drive shafts out, and I pushed out all the U-joints. That's the rear shaft. This is the front shaft. That carrier bearing, I still have to pull that yoke off and get that carrier bearing off. I got the yoke off of the differential, and I pulled the seal out of it so I can get a new one because it was damp. Wasn't leaking badly, but somewhat. I drained all the fluid out of the front drive, so I've got it left open right now so it can keep dripping. The idea is we're going to put this back together, and I'm going to fill it with some diesel fuel and just spin it, you know, with the drive shaft. Start the engine, just let it spin by itself, and you know, let it go for idling for a half hour or something, and then drain the diesel fuel out. Do that a couple times, and then fill it back up, and then we're going to go ahead and drain the rear, flush it, and fill it as well. The owner was here today, and he cleaned up all these hubs for me. The actual hub itself, he cleaned those up as well. It was a mess. He spent almost all day doing this. He's a little frustrated. You know, he paid a guy to do this work, and the guy shortcutted on everything, just like the anchor pins. These anchor pins are worn, and they come with the brake shoes. The same thing here, and they didn't replace them. And the only common denominator on all these axle seals leaking is the guy that installed them. So it's unfortunate. I have to measure these torque arms here and get them ordered. I'm going to spend a lot of time tracking down parts and trying to shop for the best prices. Brake shoes we're going to end up reusing, let them go. And I am going to replace all the drums, so we're getting all new drums for the whole entire thing. We're going to tighten these U-bolts. We're replacing these U-bolts, and air compressor's out. I got the air dryer off. It's some bargain basement China air dryer. Turbo's out, and I still have to take this hub off, clean it all up. We're going to take all this apart when we do the kingpins. But yeah, he's a little frustrated. You know, he paid a guy to do all this work. Thought he was getting a truck that was going to be in good shape and ready to run. And, you know, it's not. It's very unfortunate. It is what it is. But, yeah, we'll get him going. It's going to take a while. A lot longer than I had thought. But it seems like most of the time that is the case. But, anyways, we'll pick this up on the next one. I'm not sure if we'll be still tearing stuff apart or if we'll be going back together, but we'll bring you along for the process.